So let's go on that one example right there, right? Because I have been told as a previous California resident that plastic is the devil and we have to start charging for plastic bags because it's going to go into this fund that saves the environment, which turns out it didn't.
Surprise.
It's just an extra tax on the system because
Right.
California loves to tax. So why don't we just go with that one example of why scientifically a cotton bag or a cloth bag, even if you can reuse it 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever, is more of a detriment to the environment, right, than a plastic bag would be. Can you break that down? Because I think anybody who has an environmental bone in their body heard that and just rolled their eyes.
Yeah. So the only way to know what causes more or less impact is a thing called a life cycle analysis, LCA for short. And that's used by governments, by NGOs, by companies. It's the only way to scientifically add up how much energy did I need to make this car? You know, if you wanted to know if a gas car or an electric car was greener, right? You add up all the energy needed, and then you look at how much fuel was needed during the lifetime of the car as well. So it's not just making it, it's the whole lifetime and repairs and then disposal at the end, the amount of water needed, the amount of pollution created, the amount of waste at the end. Everything's added up. It's shockingly complicated, and that's been used for decades now. So it's all like tuned up. There's standards, so you can't cheat. It has to be peer reviewed, so the experts check that you didn't try to cheat. And that's the only way to know what causes more harm or what causes less harm, because everything has some impact, right? The only way to cause no impact is to dig a hole in your garden and go and jump in it. No one's doing that. So the only rational way to make up your mind is a life cycle study. And if you look at bags, I've never seen so many studies as there are on grocery bags. There are 30 in the world. Canada, America, Denmark, Sweden, France, everywhere has done these studies, 30 in the world. Every one ever done says that the plastic bag has least impact. Every study ever done by anybody in the history of the world. And you can find them in 2 seconds, right? Like Clemson did one. You could type LCA BAG in Google right now, and you'll get PDFs of these studies. So it makes you wonder, why has no government official in the whole history of the world, or the World Wildlife Fund or Greenpeace, why have these people who think that they know what they're doing and want to tell us what to do, why have they never done a Google search that takes 3 seconds to go and find the science before they make choices? That's a little bit fishy.
Okay, now I'm going to do this real time because I want to see this. You said,
yeah, do it.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to do Clemson study on, what did you say?
LCA bag.
LCA bag. And there it is, 2014,
right.
peer-reviewed life cycle assessment of grocery bags in common use.
Right. And that's how I found these studies, right? I don't have some people think they write to me for these studies. People from Fortune 100 companies ask me for these studies. I'm like, have you got Google? Why are you writing to me? I'm working alone, unpaid here in my office. You've got like 1,000 PhDs. Why don't you Google it yourself?
Yeah. Even the Google AI overview, which I would say Google has its own problems and how it presents information. It says a Clemson University study on grocery bags found that paper bags, while sometimes touted as more environmentally friendly, actually have a greater global warming potential than traditional plastic bags in most cases. And they also have greater impacts on other environmental categories. The study, which uses a detailed life cycle assessment approach, which you just talked about, compared the environmental impacts of different types of bags and found that plastic was the best.
Yeah.
It took me 3 seconds, and I'm a moron who barely made it out of high school.
Me too. I was a moron when I started too. So that's what shocked me, right? And I'm obsessive, as you can tell. I found 30 studies. No one else has ever been that dumb. And then I didn't stop there, right? Because I'm not a life cycle expert, right? It's like a medical doctor, right? You have your specialties. So I sent 30 studies to a life cycle analysis expert. That's what he does for a living, Neil Shackleton at Medulla. And he analyzed them all, and he wrote a statement saying, yes, every study ever done shows that plastic has the lowest impact. And as you just said, people just want to hate plastic, right? So they'll say, oh, well, maybe it has the lowest greenhouse gas, but what about the waste? What about the litter? What about the effect on the oceans? And as you just read, there are several studies there, and plastic has the least impact in pretty much every one of the categories. So people are I don't know, they're just against plastic for other reasons, I guess. And I've gone into some of the reasons why that might be. But yeah, so there are studies on bags, 30. There are studies on straws, plastics. The greenest straw is no straw, right? You don't have to be Einstein to work that out. Just don't take a straw, right? And the second greenest is the plastic, and then reuse it as many times as you can. Because no one's making us do it single use, right? No one makes us throw it away. Nobody stands there with a gun and says, put that in the trash. So my daughter reused one 50 times. So you can tell I'm not here to sell plastic, because here's a couple of amazing things for you. A, I'm just told you not to use any straw. And B, here's a funny thing. New Jersey banned bags despite 30 studies saying it would be a bad idea. 2 years later, they checked to see the effect of the bag ban. They found massively, they used the word exponentially increased greenhouse gas, which is what the study said, and they sold way more plastic. So if I was here on behalf of the plastic industry, I would be in favor of bag bans because you sell way more plastic. Because that super thin Kroger bag that you can see through, when that's no longer available because some idiot in the government banned it, now you have to go and buy a trash can liner because, you know, people reuse that for their little trash cans in their bathroom.
Yeah.
They have to go and buy a real trash can liner, which is 5 times thicker plastic. Yeah. So that's the kind of crazy nonsense that happens when people make ideological decisions based on no information.
So is this just an emotional attachment because somebody said it and then it's like a game of telephone where it spreads like wildfire? Or I'm like a very conspiracy minded libertarian. I'm always thinking about follow the money.
Yeah.
Who has a vested interest in trying to ban plastics?
Yeah. Well, there are 3 main factors that I've come up with. One is that it's public information that Michael Bloomberg is funding an organization called Beyond Plastics. And if you look at what they do, they just trash plastic all the time. It's just a smear campaign against plastic. And when you check the things that they say, they're just not true. But they've testified in front of Congress and said things which are just wildly misleading. And it's funded by a billionaire for ideological reasons. And there's another organization called Minderoo, and that's funded by iron and steel billionaires. Oh, guess what? The competition made their own NGO to make up crazy stuff about plastic. So partly it's competing industries, part of it's billionaires with too much more money than sense and ideological misunderstandings. And partly it's the green groups. Nobody's doing more harm than the biggest environmental groups. Literally, the president of Greenpeace left, and he said their business model is to tell lies for donations. They gave up on the environment years ago, according to him.
Who was that left? Do you know his name by chance?
Yeah, Dr. Patrick Moore. You can look it up. He's written 2 books about it. They're behind me. Confessions of a Greenpeace Dropout and Fake Invisible Disasters. And he's written also a business report about their business models. I can send them to you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so oh man, I have so many directions we could go here, right? The last question, I'll guess, on this conspiracy side, or why, is it because the plastic industry is tied to the oil industry? I mean, plastic is basically made from the oil industry, right? So if you hate Exxon Valdez because they dropped 1 billion gallons of oil or 1 million gallons of oil into the ocean, then you should ipso facto hate plastic. Is that part of it for the Greenpeace nut job?
It's a big part of it. So, for example, I just mentioned Michael Bloomberg, right? He funds a thing called Beyond Petrochemicals because he's against oil, right? And so that would make sense. He would fund Beyond Plastics too, because it's part of it uses 4% of oil is used to make plastic. So that makes total sense until you check the science. And here's the funny thing. I made a LinkedIn post called Bloomberg's Blooper, right? Because when you check the oil usage and plastic reduces oil consumption. It has lower fossil fuel consumption than metal, than glass, than paper. And if you actually look at the total net effect of plastic use, you need 4% of oil to make plastic, but because it makes our cars lighter and our airplanes lighter, because it prevents food waste and it insulates our home, so we need less heating oil, you end up saving more than that 4% by using the plastic. So the net effect of plastic is to reduce fossil fuel consumption, which means Michael Bloomberg is spending millions of dollars to campaign against his own wishes. That's how dumb this is, because nobody's checking the facts. I wish I was so rich that I could spend $1 million to campaign against myself.
Oh